It was a gloomy autumn night, and Sarah's house was isolated in the middle of a dense forest. The sound of rain hitting the windows and the howl of the wind echoed everywhere, creating an ominous symphony. Sarah was lying in her bed, trying to snuggle against the cold seeping through the cracks. The house, shrouded in darkness, seemed far from civilization. However, an unsettling feeling began to creep into Sarah's mind. Her senses felt alert, as if something was out of place. She tried to ignore the feeling, chalking it up to the gloomy weather of the night. But the feeling persisted, turning into a growing anxiety that kept her awake. Minutes turned into an eternity as Sarah struggled to identify what was troubling her. Every noise, every creak in the house made her more agitated. Her heart was beating fast, and a growing restlessness took hold of her. She wondered if she was becoming paranoid due to the loneliness of living in that isolated house in the middle of the forest. However, a clearer sound made her freeze in her place. It was a whisper, barely audible, coming from the living room. Sarah lay still on the bed, trying to understand what was happening. The house was empty except for herself. The sound could not be explained by the wind or rain outside. She continued to hear the sound, now a distant murmur. It was as if someone was whispering indistinct words in the dark. A feeling of discomfort grew inside her. Sarah decided she needed to investigate. Carefully, she got out of bed and picked up a flashlight that was on her nightstand. The dim light of the flashlight illuminated the room as she got dressed, ready to face the unknown that awaited her in the living room. Every step she took down the dark hallway was an echo of her anxiety. The flashlight light created dancing shadows on the walls, adding a layer of eerie surreality to the scene. Sarah finally reached the entrance to the living room and, with a flash of the flashlight, revealed a disturbing sight. One of the windows in the room was wide open, the curtain around it flapping like a ghost. Drops of rain entered, leaving a trail of moisture on the ground. But what really terrified Sarah were the muddy footprints that stretched from the window to the center of the room. A chill ran down her spine when she realized someone had broken into her house. Sarah felt vulnerable and alone. Her first reaction was to call the police, her hands shaking as she dialed the emergency number. She explained the situation, saying that there was an intruder inside her house. The operator's voice was a beacon of hope amid the impending terror. Sarah couldn't stay in the living room any longer, so she hurriedly returned to the bedroom and locked the door. She knew she needed to wait for help from the police, but the feeling of being watched made her nervous. As she waited, her anxiety grew, and time passed slowly. As Sarah anxiously awaited the arrival of the police, the sound of cautious footsteps echoed through the living room. The intruder was inside her house, moving silently, like a shadow in the night. Every noise seemed like an echo of imminent danger, and she prayed that help would arrive in time. The minutes seemed to stretch into eternity, and Sarah could clearly hear the intruder searching her house for something. The sound of objects being moved and drawers being opened was like an ominous symphony that filled her ears. Every sound was a reminder of the danger that lurked. The tension reached its peak when she heard footsteps approaching the hallway that led to her room. The door handle began to turn slowly, as if someone was carefully trying to open it. Sarah held her breath, her heart beating wildly, and held the flashlight as if it were her only defense. The door creaked as it opened inch by inch, revealing an unknown man on the threshold. His eyes were wild, and a mischievous smile spread across his face. He was armed, and his eyes met Sarah's in tense silence. Sarah, with her heart in her mouth, raised the flashlight and shined the light directly into the intruder's eyes. He let out a scream of pain and confusion, momentarily blinded. It was enough time for Sarah to quickly get up and run towards the door, locking it behind her. The intruder was furious and started banging on the door, trying to open it. Sarah picked up the phone again and dialed the police, informing them that the intruder was inside her room. The operator's voice was a balm to her troubled soul as she called for help. Knowing time was running out, Sarah looked around for something she could use as a weapon. She found a forgotten baseball bat in a corner of the room and prepared to confront the intruder if he could get in. The intruder continued to hammer on the door, and Sarah knew she needed to act quickly. She raised the baseball bat, her heart beating in time with the anxiety that gripped her. When the door finally gave way with a bang, she launched herself towards the intruder, ready to fight for her life. At this moment, police sirens echoed in the distance, quickly approaching. The intruder retreated in the face of the imminent arrival of authorities. Sarah, baseball bat in hand, backed away too, ready to defend herself. The police entered the house with weapons drawn, finding the intruder still trying to force the bedroom door. A fierce struggle ensued, but officers managed to immobilize and arrest the man, putting an end to Sarah's nightmare. As the police arrested the intruder, Sarah was finally able to regain her sense of security. She was told the man was a dangerous criminal with a history of breaking into homes in the area. His capture brought inexpressible relief. With the help of the police, Sarah was able to search her home and ensure she was safe. She didn't know what the attacker was looking for, but she was grateful to have survived the terrifying night. However, her home invasion left Sarah deep emotional scars. The feeling of vulnerability and intense fear she experienced that night never completely went away. She installed additional security measures in her home and never again felt completely safe in her own home, as the memory of that silent invasion continued to haunt her, even as the police lights receded into the darkness of the night. With the intruder in police custody, Sarah was finally able to regain a sense of relative safety. The tension and terror of that night had left her shaken, but knowing that the attacker was behind bars brought indescribable relief. Officers searched the home, ensuring there were no other intruders hiding. However, during the inspection, they made a disturbing discovery. The window through which the intruder had entered was framed by strange symbols drawn in chalk. Sarah had never seen them before and was perplexed by their presence. The officers explained that the symbols appeared to be part of some sort of dark ritual or practice. It was as if the intruder had performed some kind of mysterious ceremony before entering Sarah's house. She felt even more uncomfortable with the idea that that night had not been an isolated act of invasion, but something more sinister. Investigators continued to search the home, examining every area for clues. That's when one of them noticed a safe, hidden in a corner of Sarah's room. She barely knew of the existence of the safe and was perplexed by its presence. The safe was locked, and the police asked Sarah for permission to try to open it. She agreed, curious and eager to find out what could be stored inside. The moments that followed were tense as the police worked to try to open the safe. Finally, with a soft click, the safe opened, revealing its mysterious contents. Sarah and the officers were stunned by what they found inside. It was a collection of bizarre and disturbing objects, old photographs, old letters, broken dolls, and a variety of seemingly macabre amulets. The photographs showed unknown people in strange costumes, performing ceremonies that looked like dark rituals. The letters were written in a foreign language and contained words that Sarah could not understand. The dolls were mutilated and damaged, their features distorted into expressions of suffering. What shocked Sarah and the cops most, however, were the bizarre amulets and artifacts. Among them, there was a ritual knife with sinister engravings and a strangely polished stone that gave off an aura of darkness. The atmosphere in that room became heavy and oppressive as the officers examined the objects. The macabre discovery of the safe's contents raised many unanswered questions. Who was the intruder and what was he doing with those disturbing objects? What did those symbols and rituals have to do with Sarah's invasion? As officers continued their investigation, they discovered the intruder was a man with a history of involvement in occult practices and mysterious rituals. He was known to be part of a secret group that performed dark ceremonies deep in the forest. Sarah found herself drawn into a world of mystery and horror that she never would have imagined existed so close to her isolated home. The silent invasion she had faced was just the tip of the iceberg, an introduction to a much larger nightmare. The case became an even greater enigma for Sarah, who found herself questioning her safety and sense of normalcy. The invasion of her home and the discovery of the macabre safe led her to rethink her life and priorities. She installed even stricter security measures in her home, but the memory of that night would haunt her thoughts for the rest of her life. What else was the world hiding in the shadows, waiting to be revealed? After the disturbing discovery of the safe and the arrest of the intruder, Sarah lived with a constant feeling of unrest. The feeling that something dark was lurking in the shadows never left her. She couldn't shake the images of the haunting photographs, the macabre symbols, and the disturbing rituals. However, life went on, and Sarah was determined to return to normality. She sought therapy to deal with the trauma of the invasion and subsequent discoveries. She began to spend more time away from home, seeking refuge in the company of friends and family. She tried in every possible way. However, the darkness that had entered her life did not dissipate easily. Frequent nightmares plagued her, recreating the night of the invasion in vivid detail. She saw herself running away from the intruder, lost in the dense and dark forest, while the macabre rituals echoed in her mind. On one particularly disturbing night, Sarah woke up in a cold sweat after one of these nightmares. As she got up to get a glass of water, she noticed something strange in the bathroom mirror. There was a symbol drawn in chalk on the frame of the mirror, identical to the ones that had been found on the window during the raid. The sight of that symbol made his heart race. She was certain that she had removed all traces of the symbols after the invasion. How had that mysterious symbol reappeared? Paranoia took over her again, and the feeling that she was being watched returned with full force. Sarah immediately called the police, explaining the situation and showing the symbol on the mirror as proof. Officers returned to her home and conducted a thorough investigation. However, they found no evidence of invasion or the presence of intruders. The official explanation was that someone might have broken into his home again, leaving the symbol as an intimidating act. However, there were no tangible signs of invasion. Sarah felt like she was going crazy, unable to prove what was happening. Sarah's life began to crumble before her eyes. She became a prisoner of her own home, obsessed with finding answers to the disturbing events surrounding her. Every shadow in the forest, every noise in the night made her tremble with fear. She began to lose track of time, spending entire days locked up at home, afraid to face the outside world. Her physical and mental health began to deteriorate rapidly. She lost weight. Friends and family distanced themselves, unable to understand the storm she was experiencing. Sarah was alone in her agony, unable to escape the darkness that consumed her. She felt trapped in an endless nightmare, with the feeling that something sinister was getting closer and closer. She didn't know if the darkness was real or if it was just her mind playing with her. But one thing was certain: she was losing the battle against her own fears. Sarah's story served as a chilling reminder that sometimes terror lies not just in the outside world, but also in the disturbing depths of our own minds. Her fate remained uncertain, a victim of the unfathomable darkness that had swallowed her, while the mystery surrounding her continued to defy understanding.